questions. I'm talking about the kinds of questions that create bonds between a buyer and a seller, and they demonstrate the seller's genuine interest in understanding the buyer's needs, and they differentiate you, unlike anything else, very quickly and very memorably. And then one more step.
Welcome to the Sales Problem Podcast, where we talk everything sales, success, and personal growth. Thanks for joining us. Let's get growing. Welcome back to the Sales Problem Podcast, and welcome to Season 3, Episode 10. Today is the final episode of Season 3, and here is what we're going to give you today. Arguably, the most powerful tool in a salesperson's arsenal is great questions. And today we have Deb Calvert on the show, and she was voted as the top 30 sales professionals by Global Guru. And she knows great questions. And you as a listener are going to get some great answers today and some fantastic insights that you have never had before. So stay tuned. I'm your host, Daniel Burns, and today is a solo episode. And guess what? I'm doing what every great salesperson has had to do. Today, I'm on the road. That's right. I'm coming to you live from Fredericton, New Brunswick. Because at the Sales Problem Podcast, we don't just talk about sales, although we do a pretty good job talking about sales. We also walk the walk. We're all about client engagement. Steve and myself, we're wet-fingered sales professionals. And this is the perfect example of why this podcast exists, because today I had a 4-hour commute to my destination. What do I love to do? Put on a podcast. Yes, I listen to the Sales Problem Podcast myself, but that is the whole reason why we developed this show. If you've got a commute and you're heading to the next door, throw on the Sales Problem Podcast so that you can grow your sales and grow yourself. As always, I want to give a little bit of love to our podcast partners. Today, I started my day, as always, with a little bit of crank coffee. So I had Morning Glory in my Sales Problem Podcast mug today to start my day. Delicious light blend from the Neal brothers. And before I got on the road, I grabbed my favorite protein snack, which is mamat.ca's protein cookies. More than 20 grams of protein. They're easy, portable, delicious, and nutritious. So as always, there's a link in the show notes. Go ahead and click on that. Go over to their websites, throw in the Sales Problem 15. You're going to get 15% off your order, and it's going to come straight to your door. And that is the business. Now let's dive straight into the show. I'm excited for our guest today. We've got Deb Calvert on the show, and let me tell you why we brought her on. As I said at the top of the show, Deb Calvert was voted as Global Guru's top 30 sales professionals of 2024. And let me tell you that list is just a who's who of sales educators and authors. And Deb is an author herself. Her book, Discover Questions for Connections, Clarity, and Control, is a bestseller. And she's had 2 other previous bestsellers. And as the founder of People First Leadership Academy, she is also the president of People First Productivity Solutions. And Deb's work focuses on leadership development and team effectiveness. She is a certified master of the Leadership Challenge, which I'm excited to find out a little bit more today. And she's a certified executive coach. And you know that we love coaches on this podcast. And now get this, Deb was named one of the 65 most influential women in business. And she was formerly an HR director with a Fortune 500 company. Deb's research and methodologies have been published globally in academic journals. We are so blessed to have her on the podcast today, and we are excited. Deb, welcome to the season finale. I can't think of a better way to end a season than to have you on. Are you ready to help us solve the sales problem today?
I am, and I'm so excited to be here, Dan. Thank you very much for the invitation.
Well, we're excited to jump into the first segment of our show, Deb. I'm sure you've listened. It's the elevator pitch, the classic scenario that all salespeople find themselves in. We've only got a few minutes sometimes to explain some big topics, and that's what we're going to do. We're going to throw you on the elevator, go through each floor, and on each floor, we're going to have some great topics that our listeners can get some insights to. Are you ready to jump on the elevator with me, Deb?
Going up?
All right. She's game. First floor. Let's go up. I'm excited to hear about asking great sales questions.
Well, it's the perfect ground level topic. We got to start there because in sales, you have to gather information. You have to build rapport. You have to be able to use time very, very wisely. So you do that by first learning the difference between a quality question and a throwaway question.
Ooh.
Step 2, once you know the difference, is figuring out how do you craft quality questions. I'm talking about the kinds of questions that create bonds between a buyer and a seller, and they demonstrate the seller's genuine interest in understanding the buyer's needs, and they differentiate you, unlike anything else, very quickly and very memorably. And then one more step. I know I'm cramming 3 things into the first floor here, but once we've identified the difference and then we know how to craft a quality question, the other piece of that is you have to be open. You have to be responsive and nimble, right? Not asking canned questions, the ones that are designed to try to steer the buyer to some predetermined outcome. But I'm talking about asking natural, curious kinds of questions and then being able to ask follow-up questions, which have tremendously more value than the original question.
Love it. I just love that word curiosity too, because I think we miss that sometimes. It's just that curious nature behind questions, so people don't think that we're trying to lead them to our end result. Is there, when you say quality questions, is there one that comes to mind that you love to kind of ask, or that you think people should probably lean towards?
Oh, it's so hard to pick just
I
one,
know.
but I will tell
know.
you that a question that helps a buyer think, helps them to pause and reflect, that's a quality question. My favorite compliment is when someone says, huh, that's a really good question.
Mm.
I'll tell you one that often gets there since you're looking for an example. It's a question that gets to why does something matter? So the buyer says, I want to do this and this and this. Okay, which one's most important and why? And they don't necessarily have the ready response, but they will get there and they will appreciate you helping them get that kind of clarity.
Oh, that's so important to really find out what is important about what you're asking. They can give you a response, but do we really know why it's important to them? The one that comes to mind for me, Deb, that I love to ask is, what would you like to walk away with today? So I really know, okay, there's something that's important to them. Make sure that I give them that before I leave today, because I just found out there's at least one thing that they really wanted to get from me being here today, rather than just my agenda of what I think I should say.
You know what our questions have in common? They're both very buyer focused and they're about what do you value and need and how can I be the person who brings it to you?
Love it. That's that servant mindset that we talk a lot about here.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. That's first floor. We did pack in a lot, didn't we?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Let's go up to the second floor. Talk to me about the leadership challenge.
It is magnificent. For anybody who doesn't know it, you probably do. It's the work of Jim Kouzes and Barry Posner. So you've probably heard those names or seen them in footnotes of just about any good book on leadership. This is 40 years of research. It's all evidence-based, and it's a way to look at the behaviors that cause a leader to be more effective, the behaviors that they more frequently demonstrate than peers who are less effective. It's a beautiful framework. As I said, it's evidence-based. And it's for leaders at any level. In fact, I co-authored a book with Jim and Barry, and this was back in 2017. It's called Stop Selling and Start Leading. And what we did was we took a look at these 30 behaviors, these proven behaviors that make leaders more effective, and we researched the question, what if sellers displayed these same behaviors more often? And we conducted this massive B2B buyer research study, and we found out that every single one of the 30 behaviors, buyers wanted to see those significantly more often, that they would favor a salesperson who demonstrated those behaviors, and that they didn't think they saw nearly enough of those behaviors. So it was a good finding for sellers to be leaders as opposed to entering in as just another salesperson.
But I just want to highlight that again for our listeners. Stop selling, start leading. Did I get that right?
With the word "and" in there. Stop selling and start leading.
And start leading. Listeners, go grab that book. I'm going to grab it myself. So let's go to floor number 3, soft skills. How are those a competitive advantage? I think sometimes people think soft skills and is it really going to impact my results? But can you get a competitive advantage?
Absolutely. First of all, human to human. So I'll just acknowledge the obvious, and then we'll talk about some more specifics. Communication, for example, that's the first thing that comes to mind when people think about soft skills. Of course, if you can communicate well, you will be differentiated. You'll have an advantage over a seller who is sloppy or haphazard in their communication. Quality questions fall under communication. So we covered that, but let me put out 3 emerging soft skills. The World Health Organization, for one, says that the number 1 competency needed to thrive and survive in any career in the coming years, including sales, is critical thinking. So that's a pretty good one to have. It'll serve you in all parts of your life. But people sometimes they don't want that because it feels like, no, I'm more of an emotional person. That feels clinical, or I'm not very logical. So hang on, that's not what it means. Critical thinking is really just the ability to pause long enough to not let emotions override the thinking piece, the questioning piece. It's about being discerning. It's about, sure, put a little logic into the mix. Zoom out, though, and balance emotions with these other important inputs. Don't be hasty. So ultimately, a seller who can objectively evaluate a situation and then help buyers see things more logically, that's a huge advantage. And buyers, don't take my word for it. This came out in the research project that I was talking about a moment ago. Well, here, I said I'd give you 3. Here's another one.
Yes, keep it coming.
I think people haven't heard too much about this, but if you would like to learn more, there's fabulous research that was conducted by Garner. So it's all about sense making. Right? Sense making is just what it sounds like. It's the ability to simplify the complex and to clarify the ambiguous and to distill information overload, infobesity, just down into some key points that will compel buyers and help them to move forward. Sense makers are sorters of information. So in this age, I mean, we are all inundated with information. So here again, this is, if you can do this, you will differentiate yourself from all those other sellers who are fire hosing buyers and causing them to back up, not lean in. And the third one, if I could, emerging, not something people think about all that often, but this one is learning agility. And the Center for Creative Leadership is the place to go if you want to learn more about this one. Learning agility is just, it's the ability to cross-apply something that you learned in some other unsimilar situation to where you are right now, this thing that feels daunting and different in the moment. But to have the confidence that comes from learning and tackling a problem before. This one is so big that it is called a compensator competency. That's a tongue twister.
Yeah.
And a compensator competency, that simply means if you have other things you don't know how to do, other information that you haven't learned yet, you're going to get grace if you've got learning agility.
Okay.
The other one happens to be being a very good listener. So to me, those are two master skills because I need to compensate for lots of stuff I don't know. Um, what it takes to get this one is first having a growth mindset, right? The willingness to take some measured risks and to step outside your comfort zone a little bit.
Yeah, we talk a lot about growth mindset on the podcast and trying to get people outside of their comfort zone. And I love what you say about emotional versus logical, because I certainly have had salespeople that I've managed before where those emotions, when you're out there and you're dealing with people and you're getting rejection and you're getting some wins, there's these highs and there's these lows, and sometimes that can be the key is managing that emotional state. And I really like what you say about kind of the logical side or the scientific side and applying that so that buyers end up really kind of getting what they need.
Yeah, I always want to put a caveat on what I say about emotions. Emotions are valid; they're real.
Yeah.
I'm not asking anybody to pretend they're not, but to think of emotions as one data point and take the other ones in too, and put them all
Okay.
together.
So let's head up to floor number 4. So much has come out already, Deb. I'm loving this. A word that I didn't know until I started to kind of research you. So I'm super curious on this one. The word is ennoblement. Tell me a little bit about ennoblement.
Yeah, it is a real word. I didn't make it up. It's a word that ought to be out there in the day-to-day lingo everywhere, but it means when you ennoble someone, you are making them feel worthy or important. And its opposite, you've probably heard the opposite of ennoble, it's ignoble, right? To make something seem small or unimportant.
Yeah.
Okay, so we hear all about like sales enablement, and that's certainly important. But sellers also need to feel ennobled. The work they do is extremely valuable, extremely important and worthy. And buyers also need this. They need to be
Mhm.
enabled because you're a sense maker and you made things clear and easy for them. And then they need to be ennobled, that you see them as worthy and important. So I'm going to say something controversial here. I hope you don't mind.
Go for it.
Yeah. I, the number one way you can ennoble buyers is to stop bucketing them as leads and prospects and tire kickers and whales and whatever other dehumanizing categories you might be using to sort them out, because those categories are actually all about you, the seller, what the value of this buyer could be to you. And that just sets the whole relationship up to be more self-serving instead of helpful to the buyer. And I do believe that buyers sense it, they feel it. And it's one of the reasons that buyers lament that sellers treat them poorly. So
Mhm.
just try this, right? Instead of bucketing them, meet the buyer where they are. Right? Learn about their needs, really learn by asking quality questions. And sure, learn about their needs, their business needs for your product, but also learn about their human needs, right? Needs for trust, for certainty, for security, to be heard, to be treated with dignity and respect. Because before they were buyers, they were humans.
I love that. I mean, on this podcast, we talk so much about the relationship side and creating connection. And I think when you're treating people as worthy, as important, what a great way to connect human to human. And there's so much business that can be done along the way. If you're just treating people as wallet share, then you're really not, gaining that connection that could actually lead to more sales growth than if we just treated them as, okay, I had the transaction, now I'm moving on to the next lead.
And
Yeah.
it's so counterintuitive because you are in your CRM and people are categorized that way. And you're talking to your sales manager and your one-to-one and updating your forecast. And this is the mindset that we're driven to think about buyers in. And it messes up the relationship from the very first meeting if you walk in that way.
Yeah, I think sometimes we take that language from our sales environment and sometimes we forget and bring
Yeah.
that into a client environment, which we don't want to do.
Ouch. No.
All right. So, on to the next question, Deb. This is one that we love to ask on the show all the time because the podcast is really about bringing on people that have, different bits of experience and expertise. I always feel like each guest that we bring on, they've got some little nugget kind of trap that is inside of them that is unique to them, that is a certain bit of expertise, certain insight that we want to share with our audience. So what would be your favorite nugget of something to share with our listeners that can only come from you and your unique background, your unique experience?
Well, this comes from a feeling of being fed up with a lot of my clients. As a coach and as a consultant,
Okay.
there are certain competencies that you see oftentimes. We want to hire leaders who are able to deal with ambiguity. That's a really common one. Or we want managerial courage. And I just got sort of fed up with that because it occurred to me one day that people can't manufacture courage, especially coming out of the pandemic and the uncertainty of the world that we live in. Do we have the right to be asking people to show up with courage? So it got me to thinking, okay, well, where does courage come from? I think courage comes from having confidence. When you have confidence, you're more likely to be courageous, which then begs the question, okay, let's peel it back a little bit more. Where does confidence come from? And I settled on clarity. Based on my own observations and work with clients, if you want courage, back it up. Clarity equals confidence. Confidence equals courage. So stop telling people to deal with ambiguity. Instead, have a competency to be a creator of clarity, right? Get clarity, get it for yourself, and then give clarity to other people by being a sense maker, and value clarity so you can see when it's missing. And if you do this, you'll save time, you will preserve relationships, you'll prevent mistakes, and you'll be more confident and courageous. So that makes you extremely valuable to other people.
Deb, I think you just struck gold. I think that is such a great point because when I think of the times that I'm the most confident, it's definitely when I'm clear.
Yeah.
When I know exactly where I'm pointed, if I can see the target, then I can hit the target. But if I can't see the target, I'm not clear on what I'm talking about. I don't know my product. I haven't been in that situation, then I'm not going to be as confident. And a lot of the times I think, yeah, you're right. Courage is linked to that. Do I even want to do it without the clarity that I've got the skill to be able to do it?
Yeah. And here's the best part. You don't have to sit around and wait for somebody else to give you clarity. They won't.
Yeah.
But you can ask quality questions and you can dig and get the clarity that you need. And to me, that's one of the biggest values of being a good question asker.
It's such a valuable thing to get from a coach too. When
Yeah.
you go into a session and you're not really sure about something, you get asked some really great questions by a coach and you come out the other side of a session feeling clear, feeling like, okay, now I know what was either getting in the way or where I have to be headed.
And that's what salespeople should be doing with buyers too, giving them that kind of feeling of, all right, I see now. Right, it was up here. I needed someone to extract it and help me get it right in front of myself.
Absolutely. I think coaching is a part of sales. We're just not necessarily talking about it as coaching a buyer,
Yes.
but I think it's the same type of skill set. So, talk to me about another soft skill that's kind of on the other side of asking great questions, which is listening. And in your opinion, what really makes a great listener? And is it important to sales?
So important. It's important to life. Um, I tell people when I teach about questions, please don't ask a question. The very best question is worthless if you're not willing to openly listen, truly listen to the response. People can tell when you're just listening to respond. They can tell when you're halfway listening and you think you're just being polite. You're leaning in and nodding, but they can tell when you're
Mm-hmm.
not truly, really listening. So, two things about listening. The first is take it up a notch. You already know probably that a passive listener, that's just something we know is hearing if you're hearing abled, right? If you're passively listening, get it to active. You're engaging your brain. You are listening fully and processing what's being said. If you're already doing that, take it up one more notch, not just active listening, but empathetic listening. Now your ears, your brain, and your heart are all involved. You're listening to deeply understand. You're listening for the feeling behind the words, the pauses, the tonality, when people are excited and they talk a little faster, right? You're picking up on all of that when you're listening with empathy. And if you struggle to do this, I'll give you one more pro tip. The biggest problem for people when it comes to listening is that you have an agenda. Sellers, you have an agenda. You want to close the sale. You're looking for the nugget so you can pounce and create the solution. So tuck your agenda away. Don't go into the conversation listening for the thing you want to hear or the thing that's familiar that you expect to hear. Instead, train your brain to listen for what's different, what you haven't heard before, what you didn't expect. It'll force you to listen far better. You won't accidentally interrupt or cut somebody off, and you'll, again, establish this trust and this bond that is so much more natural. So that curiosity kicks in here, listening for what's different, not what's familiar.
Yeah, I think people can feel when you are really listening and when you're listening to respond. I think that's pretty evident. One of the things that I love, Deb, is really focusing on words that people use and then asking that next question of, oh, you use that word. Tell me a little bit more about that, because then they really certainly hear that you're listening to them, because you can feed back a little bit of what they've said to you.
That's a follow-up question, which is so much more valuable than an initial question. So people ask me like you did, what's a really good question? Well, starter questions are only so good. It's when you've listened and you've felt and you've shown interest. You ask a follow-up question that could never come out of anywhere else but the thin air right in between you and the other person. And that's where people feel validated.
Love that. So as salespeople, we are taught to overcome objections. And I think sometimes it seems like we're not really listening to buyers. So in terms of overcoming objections, is there a way that we can do that better so that people feel like we're not just waiting to pounce on that thing that they said, or we completely dismiss everything and say, oh, but have you thought about this, to try to overcome what they're telling us instead of taking it in, listening, asking more questions? How do we get better at overcoming objections?
Well, I have a 5-step process that we won't have time to go into, but I will distill it down into a couple of steps. And the first one is do whatever you have to do to get your adrenaline under control, because it's stressful. It's stressful to anticipate and then hear that objection and know that everything is riding on this response that you're about to make. So take a beat. Now that beat could be, for me, it's, Dan, thank you for sharing that with me. Let me just make sure I understand, and I will play it back to you. Because what I'm really doing inside my head is sorting out, this isn't, that Dan said this. He didn't say all this other stuff that's similar that I heard before. He only said this. Let me just make sure I'm clear about that. And my adrenaline, my physiological response has a chance to calm down. When your body has fight or flight mode, your adrenaline's pumping blood into your arms and your legs so you could run or fight. The place that it got that extra blood into your arms and legs is out of your brain. So you're not very smart in that moment. So don't try to overcome the objection now. Take a few deep breaths, take that beat to get your adrenaline back under control. And then just the one step out of the 5-step process that we had to talk about is let's make sure it's a real objection, because buyers know they have to play the game. They have to put something out there, and they will give you all kinds of false objections. It's almost conditioned for them to do that.
Yeah.
So here's the best way I know to find out if it's the real objection. You simply ask it in the form of a question. So you gave me the objection, you're higher than my competition. Okay. Oh, so if I wasn't higher priced than your competition, would we be moving forward? Because you're either going to say, well, yeah, you might think I'm going to give you a deal. I don't have to do that, by the way. I just, I'll adjust my response accordingly. Or you might say, well, no, it's actually that, And now here comes the real objection. So let me test the objection by finding out if that weren't the case. I'm not promising to change it. It might be the case. I'm just trying to find out if we took that out, would you be moving forward with me? And then really listen to what they say.
This is an absolute masterclass, Deb. Everything that you're giving us here is gold. So listeners, just rewind a little bit there the last couple of minutes and listen to that again. There's so much great stuff you've just packed in here for us. I want to ask you a question that I haven't asked on the podcast before, but I heard a great quote the other day. It was from Alex Hermosi, and he said, sales is supposed to be a dance, not a fight. And it really struck me that so many situations, we've got the buyer who, wants to buy something, needs something for their business. We've got a seller who's got that product and also wants to make a sale. There's so much common interest there that you think the equation should be pretty simple. And then we end up in this situation where the buyer's trying to get everything they possibly can, and the seller's trying to hold on to every dollar and not drop their price. And it turns into this fight where the buyer and seller are against each other, rather than it being a dance where the salesperson is kind of leading the way and both people get to the thing that they ultimately want. And I'm just curious to get your take on, why does it seem like we end up in that fight more often than we want to be?
Here again, we've got all these messages that we're surrounded with. The sales rally that, somebody's getting you all pumped up with is largely about going to do battle. And we have these adversarial win-lose kinds of perspectives about buying and selling. The idea of consultative selling might be an old idea, but here's what I liked best about it. It talks about partnerships. Right? You're coming alongside your buyer to partner with them. What you have in common is you both want to meet the need that they've got. And so to do that dance, to be a good partner, you have to be able to move together. You have to have the same music. And if your music is different because you never heard their true need and you never aligned around their true need, they're not going to let you take the lead. Right? You're going to step on their toes. You've got to be attentive. Out there on the dance floor, you have to be able to move in sync. And that's what partners do. If you focus only on winning the sale, if you let yourself be fueled by that intensity of sales meetings and quota pressures, you're always going to see your buyer as an obstacle that you need to trample to get what you need, as opposed to the partner who's going to be here with you, and you're there to be there with them too.
I love that word you used, attentive, because I think so many times the buyer comes in and they're really armored up. They're ready for having to negotiate, or that they're going to be told some things. They're ready for almost a bad experience. And I think it's a real mark of a sales professional to be able to slowly bring down the wall and
Yes.
get them on the other side. So instead of being so stiff, they start to kind of get into that dance. And I think if you are an attentive salesperson, you can kind of bring them maybe to your side a little bit.
I agree.
Yeah.
This is what we're up against because we have a bad reputation. Our whole profession has a bad reputation. So we do have to set ourselves apart and not play into that, not meet the buyer's low expectations of us.
If I had one goal, Deb, it would be to rid the world of bad salespeople, so that complexion changes, because so many people I've met in this industry are just true professionals like yourself who really understand that dance. And I think it's a remarkable thing when it's done right.
Yeah, I
Yeah,
agree.
I'd like to shift the focus to personal growth, which is something we talk a lot about on the podcast. And sometimes we get caught up maybe in the script or the tactic or the question to ask or the thing to do with sales books. There's the 5-step process. But I wonder sometimes, is that what salespeople need to get to that next level? I'm wondering if you can talk a little bit about what you think might get in people's way that stops them from becoming the best version of themselves.
Well, you've heard the saying, you can't teach an old dog new tricks. And to me, what that really gets to is that all of us, in some way, as we get older, at some point we stop valuing learning. For some, it happens, you know, early in our growing up years, and for others, it's a point when we reach a certain level of our career and we know a lot and we're experienced, and we don't feel like there's anything new to learn. And to go into a classroom or to listen to a podcast or read a book, there's a fear of exposure. There's even to ourselves, there's a vulnerability and an ego blow when something humbles us. I didn't know that, or I was doing that wrong, or wow, this is something that I need to improve. So we resist learning because all those negative, vulnerable things could happen. And as a result, we get complacent. We rest on our laurels, our past achievements. We stop even aiming for um, finding new potential within ourselves. I'll give you another word since you like words.
Yeah.
Entelechy, another real word, EntelechY, comes from Greek, and it means to unleash potential. I love that word, right? But we might think about doing that for other people. Oh, I'm going to be a mentor to someone. I'm going to become a parent. Um, I'm a sales manager. I'm going to help my team, right? But what about ourselves, right? Every single person has untapped potential. Now, finding it means you have to be humble and you have to learn, but why not? Why leave it there undiscovered?
I love that. I'm learning so much on the podcast today, Deb. I've got entelechy and I've got ennoblement. Did I say those right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh, see? There's so much to learn on this podcast. I'm super interested to know. This is a question again I've never asked on the podcast, but is there a time where you've ran into a seller? You were out to buy something, and you just came across the pushy salesperson, the sleazy salesperson, the salesperson that just didn't have any of the things that we're talking about on the podcast today. Have you ever been in that bad buying situation? And if so, what advice, if you could go back to that salesperson, would you give them to say, hey, here's what you did wrong. Here's how we should have done this so that they could have learned?
Well, if it's in person, it's not a matter of going back to people. My
Okay.
husband won't go car shopping with me or into certain other situations because I provide sales training on the fly when people need it. So perhaps that's not very nice of me, but I have had a few thank yous
I
over the
think you're
years.
qualified to, Deb. From everything I've heard today, I think that's a good thing.
Yeah, it's to me, it's what we've been talking about. So does this happen on car lots more than any other place? Yes, in my experience, it does. And that's just another shame on that profession. Um, it, when I take my husband with me, sadly, even in this day and age, car salespeople talk to him more than they talk to me, even though I'm the one buying a car and I should get to choose. The worst experience, the one that comes to mind right away, is I wanted a certain car. I knew exactly what I wanted, and I wanted it in a certain shade of blue. And I'd been to several dealerships, and nobody had it in stock. So I was at this, fifth or sixth dealership, and I said, I want this car, this color. And literally, the salesperson rolled his eyes, turned his back to me, and looked at my husband and said, clearly, there are better reasons to buy a car. Let's go over here and look at this one. And I was so offended. So it was, the stereotype, the dehumanizing aspect of that, the not ennobling me. And the other one that happens a lot more frequently, probably to all of us, is it's going to be a non-starter if I can immediately tell that a salesperson is lying to me, even if it's humorous. I'm not going to let the out and out lie get dissolved by the humor. So I got one today, and it said, Deb, I've been searching for you everywhere. I even called your third grade teacher to try to figure out where you are. It was a cold email. And I
Okay.
thought, well, that's so dumb. I mean, why, why, why even say that to me? But this happens, right? LinkedIn connections and cold emails. People often say to me, I read your book. And so I'll, indulge a call, but I can tell right away, you didn't read my book. What? Don't tell me that. I can't trust you. And it blemishes the entire profession, right? That whole thing we were talking about. So I get indignant about that.
Yeah, there's so much cold outreach now that is very, I feel, disingenuous. Like
Yes.
it just doesn't seem natural. I'm not sure exactly if it's in any way effective. Like, do you think it works on a certain demographic of people, which is why people take that route, or is it just a misunderstanding of how to create connection?
See, I think humor feels good to people. So you get enough trainers who are clever and tell people to put these little humorous things, and they sell their list of them. Um, and people want to believe that humor is going to be a good icebreaker. Does it work with some demographic or some people? I don't know the research behind that. I just know it doesn't at all work for me. And I've talked to a lot of people who say, nope, I don't want it either. But maybe we're the outlier demographic.
As a buyer, I know I cannot part with my money if the process and the experience that the seller is giving me is bad. I just feel, even if I want it so bad, I just feel like I can't reward somebody who's not following any of the proper process. So,
Yeah, I'm with you.
Deb, I've loved our conversation today. I'd love to know where our audience can find out more about you.
Well, I hope you don't mind if I give 3 ideas here.
Yeah.
So, my website for the business, so for learning more about leadership development, team effectiveness, and so on, that's People First PS, People First Productivity Solutions, peoplefirstps.com. But a really great place to go if you just want to, get some free good stuff. On the Leadership Academy, People First Leadership Academy, we have about 100 courses, and most of them are free. Some are little snack size 5-minute lessons, and some are live interactive 45-minute kinds of classes. They come in a variety of formats. So that site is peoplefirstpotential.com, all 3 words spelled out. And we're enrolling right now, actually, for 2025 masterclasses on crafting quality questions. So come on over, People First Potential, look for the masterclass, and you can come into 3 sessions. That one's a lot of fun. And last but not least, I mean this one very sincerely, I love getting follow-up questions and having great conversations after an opportunity like this one. So email me, anybody, anytime, just deb.calvert@peoplefirstps.com. I'd love to talk to you.
We are going to put all those links in the show notes, so it will not be hard to find Deb Calvert. So Deb, today we have loved having you on the show. You have helped us solve the sales problem. You have given our listeners some knowledge they need to thrive and succeed. You've helped them grow by enhancing what they know. Listeners, remember that we love you and we appreciate you. Thanks so much for listening. We have grown to over 36 countries right now. So if you've taken some value from Deb and this podcast today, please share her information, share her message across the globe with anyone that needs it. And until the next episode, just keep building the best version of you.